CNN raised some eyebrows last week, to say the least, when they released a poll that showed President Trump trailing Joe Biden by 14 points in the race for the White House. And the Trump campaign questioned that data used to gather the results and sent CNN a cease and desist, and also demanded they apologize. Well, leading to that is the exchange on CNN's reliable source between host Brian Stelter and Trump senior legal advisor Jenna Ellis. Listen.
Look, no pollster in the world would stand behind this as a legitimate poll according to industry standards. So why would CNN
What
publish
industry
this?
standards?
Why? For one reason. For
this
one
poll is in
reason,
line
Brian,
with
and
other
that's
networks'
because they
polls.
want to undermine.
Pretty much every poll
and
shows
let
Trump
me finish.
losing
They
to
want
Biden.
to undermine. That's not true. You polled adults, not registered voters, not likely voters, but just
That's a normal
adults.
polling procedure.
And that is not the industry standard.
Well, that kept going on for about 10 minutes. We're joined now by Jenna Ellis. Jenna, so good to see you.
Great to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm not going to lie. That was kind of hard to watch, actually, the whole thing. It was just back and forth. You guys were just talking over each other so much. But can you break it down for our audience? What is your issue with this CNN poll?
Yeah, and thank you for actually letting me speak, unlike Brian, who interrupted me.
We're actually going to cut you off the whole time.
Just into it, right?
Jenna.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, so our issue, of course, is that they released this poll. They polled adults, not registered voters, not likely voters, and they're showing this as Biden 14 points ahead, which does not mirror any other poll. And of course, this isn't industry standard. And so for Brian, I mean, he didn't even understand what the letter was all about, why it's so important to get accurate information out to Americans. And he wouldn't even agree on that specific interview that media platforms should never publish false information. That was shocking to me, actually.
You know, it's funny, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but I appreciated the fact that in the interview you pushed back, which is he invited you on the show, I take it, to hear your concerns about this, and then he wouldn't let you talk. And I think at one point you said, Brian, you invited me on here to give a response, and it was sort of odd that he didn't want to hear it. But the thing that's interesting to me is when I looked at this poll in the crosstabs, they've got the Republican rate at 25% when it's probably closer to 32, 33 based on the 2016 election. And so you're definitely going to get a skewed result because you're undercounting the Republicans. But the question I have for you is, like, who cares? It's CNN. It's so obviously wrong that I just want to know the motivation. Why did you care?
Yeah, well, because, for the few viewers that do watch CNN, it's important to the president, it's important to the campaign to push back on false and misleading information. And so the media has to be held accountable when they're putting out and publishing polls like this, because some people will believe them. And so if they're not held accountable for their knowingly false and malicious lies that they've been perpetuating for the past 4 years, I mean, this is something that Donald Trump is right to push back in every instance of false and manipulated data. And the more that we continue to do that, I mean, CNN is actually part of a lawsuit now for a knowingly and willfully false statement that they published intentionally with actual malice that appeared on their opinion pages. And so the campaign, this isn't just an isolated incident. We've been pushing back against the New York Times, against Washington Post, against CNN for their false information so they don't mislead Americans.
Okay. And just to be clear real quick, you are asking for them not to air this poll. You're not suing them, are you? Or are you?
We haven't. Okay. No, we have not at this point. We've just sent a letter asking them to retract it. And frankly, a lot of people now, because they've read that letter, they understand the problem with the poll.
Okay. Yeah, because they made it seem like that it was so epic that this was happening, and yet people send cease and desist letters all the time in campaigns. In fact, I think CNN sent you guys one because you used a clip of CNN in one of your ads. So they make it sound like you guys have gone to such extremes when, in fact, this is rather commonplace in campaigns. So I wanted to make sure I cleared that up. But thank you for sharing with us. What?
They just manipulate that, right? That's their whole thing. They don't understand. And of course, Brian Stelter doesn't understand that this is business as usual, especially among lawyers.
All right. Well, thank you, Jenna. I appreciate you coming on and explaining that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, with Black Lives Matter protests continuing to sweep the country, some on the left have tried to paint President Trump as a villain to the black community. But take a look at this. A new poll by the Democracy Institute shows that President has a 40% approval rating among black voters. Those numbers may be pretty shocking to some, but maybe not to civil rights attorney Leo Terrell. He says he's stopped drinking the Democratic Kool-Aid. And now we welcome Leo Terrell. Leo, thanks for being here.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, and glad to be here.
All right. Well, recently you said that you would vote for President Trump if Joe Biden selected Kamala Harris as his running mate. That seems like she's a potential front runner. What's so egregious about Kamala Harris that you would vote for Trump, and why have you stopped drinking the Democratic Kool-Aid?
Well, very simple. I cannot take the hypocrisy of the Democrats right now. Joe Biden insulted every African American in this country when he claims that if you vote Republican, you ain't black. That is insulting. And it also makes an assumption that we should automatically vote for Democrats. Defund the police. There are a lot of law and order Democrats who do not believe in defunding the police. And finally, Kamala Harris. She incarcerated more African Americans as the Attorney General. So it's just a party of hypocrisy. This is no longer the JFK Democratic Party.
Hey, Leo, let me take you back to the poll that Lindsay referenced. I got to admit, I spent 6 years at the RNC. We tried to do a lot of outreach to minority communities, including the black community. 40% would be an all-time modern-day history if the president came anywhere near close to that. Do you think that number is accurate, or do you think it's off?
Sean, I think it's high, but I think 15 to 20% is reachable. And if he gets 15 to 20%, he wins the election, hands down. What he has to do is ignore the Democratic leadership. And what he did today, for example, signing that executive order, in my opinion, as a civil rights attorney, historic. He accomplished with the stroke of a pen what Obama and Biden couldn't do in 8 years. He needs to talk to the voters, not the politicians. The Democrats will never give him credit because they do not want him to succeed.
Hey, Leo, real quick, we've got to go, but I want to ask you this. We've been talking about silent voters, right? People who don't want to talk. Do you think that there is a high amount of silent voters within the black community that just don't want to say that they'll vote for Trump, but they really are?
Let me think about that. Yes.
Okay.
A lot.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for coming on and sharing your view with us. Hope to have you back soon.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Okay, well, coming up, we're going to continue our game of Veep stakes. Who's surging, who's fading, and who might just surprise everyone? I've got something to throw in the mix here that I don't know how many of you are going to see coming. Plus, country music star Colin Ray joins us. He held one of the first concerts since the shutdown. He's going to tell you how special it was and what it meant.